Welcome, everybody, to another edition of One Question for Every Fight here on the SevereMMA YouTube page. I am Spencer Kyte, and this week we are looking at UFC Vegas 70 from the UFC Apex on Saturday, February 25th. I think I got that date right. A fight card headlined by a light heavyweight fight between Nikita Krylov and Ryan Spann. Some good fights on this card, some interesting returns, some interesting debuts, a bunch of stuff that piques my interest. I know, as always, I am the guy that is way more into all of these fight cards and events like this and events like last week. And this is much better than last week. Please trust me when I tell you that. So we're just going to jump right into it because it's a big fight card. It's 13 fights, 14 fights, I believe. And so we're going to dive in and run through these, starting from the top as we always do. Nikita Krylov, Ryan Spann. The question is, can Spann continue rolling? So for a long, long time, Ryan Spann has been a guy that I have been curious about and interested in from a can we see him put it together standpoint. Through my numerous conversations with Saif Saud and talking about his team and talking to him about his athletes, we've always talked about Ryan as being a guy where it's never been about the technical skills or the talent. The thing that has gotten in the way has been more the mental, more the focus. And you've seen that in fights, right? The couple of fights that he's lost in the UFC, the Johnny Walker fight, he has Walker hurt in a couple of instances and just makes bad decisions, makes bad choices, puts himself in a spot where he can get hurt and then finished. And against Anthony Smith, same kind of thing. Has the big carry, brings him over to his corner, plants him on the ground, but isn't able to capitalize. Anthony Smith gets back up. Ryan walks onto some big shots, fight's done, and we're out of here. Since then, however, he's moved from Beaumont, Texas to the Dallas-Fort Worth area where Fortis MMA is located. So he's no longer doing a 4.5-hour drive each way, which he was doing regularly in order to go and train. He's now pretty close to the gym. And so we've seen the results as well. He went out and got a good win over Ion Cutelaba. And then last time out, had a very good performance against Dominic Reyes. Now, if you want to, take a little bit away from Ryan Spann because Dominic Reyes hasn't looked good in his last several fights, and this is now 4 straight losses, fine. I won't begrudge you that. I won't challenge you on that. Dom has struggled of late. But Spann has looked really good. Those first round wins were the sort of victories that I've long hoped to see from him against this level of competition. But now he gets back into a fight against a guy that's ranked ahead of him, that also comes in on 2 straight wins, 2 good wins, knocked out Alexander Gustafsson, won a decision over Volkan Ozdemir at UFC 280, has been in there 40 times, been in there with the who's who of the division, right? Since he's come back from his little break from the UFC, Krylov has faced, I think it's 3 former champions and 2 title contenders. So though he's 4-4, those 5 athletes alone tell you the level of competition he's faced, and he's beaten the last 2 of them who are both title challengers. And so this is a big test for Ryan Spann. This is another one of those moments where if this is real, he goes out and puts it together and we see that performance. He has another performance similar to the one that he had last time out against Dominic Reyes, or 2 fights back against Cutelaba, and he gets Nikita Krylov out of there the way that, Paul Craig did, the way that some others have in the past. And if he's not that guy, if he hasn't really figured it out and he's just going to be who he is now, if the ceiling is sort of who he is now, all action, dangerous, but there's always going to be a little flaw. There's always going to be a little hiccup here and there. Then Krylov gets him out of there and it is what it is. But I'm really curious because I think Ryan Spann is somebody that I understand that it has taken some time to get to this place. All of the physical elements are there, but sometimes it's not physical. Like, especially when you have all of those physical gifts. I almost would argue at times, and you see this in other sports, and I know I always reference basketball, but it's my favorite sport beyond MMA. You see these basketball players that are, Andrew Wiggins being Canadian, perfect example, right? 6'8", all the athleticism in the world. And just like the drive, the passion, the hunger, the focus, all of those things wasn't always there in his career because everything just came naturally to him. And it was just relatively easy, and you could get by just being you. Whereas a guy like TJ McConnell, who is a backup point guard for the Indiana Pacers, is 6'1", white as can be, has to hustle for everything, has to scrape and claw and scratch and bite and kick to find his place, and finally worked his way into a place, has that different level of work ethic and that different level of figuring it all out. He figured it out mentally and then had to find a way to get his skills to fit. And I think Ryan Spann is more that Andrew Wiggins. And we've seen Wig over the last couple of years look really good in Golden State, figured out exactly who he is, what his best avenues to success are. I think we're starting to see that with Spann. I'm not 100% sure. And I think Saturday tells us a little bit more. How this one plays out is going to answer that question of whether Ryan Spann is going forward to be a title challenger or whether this is where he sits, this is where he resides, which is okay, but we need to just dial back those expectations that he's going to be more in the future. Move to the co-main event, Andre Muniz and Brendan Allen in an intriguing middleweight matchup. My question here, is this where Muniz makes a statement? So in 2011, he breaks Jacare's arm in May and then fights Eric Anders towards the end of the year in December. I think it was on the last pay-per-view card of the year in December. And everybody sort of has a moment of like, oh, right, this guy. It's 4-0 in the UFC. It's 3 straight armbar submissions. He looks great. And we start talking about him as, is this a guy that's going to be the next contender in the middleweight division? Myself, Sean, and Ian taped an episode of The Contender for the Patreon talking about Andre Muniz. I believe it was ahead of his fight with Uriah Hall. So the fight with Hall happens, and it's pretty dull. It's one-sided. Andre Muniz wins handily, but he's not really attacking. Uriah Hall's making the right choices and decisions on the ground, and Muniz just kind of rolls through to a unanimous decision win on the scorecards after 15 minutes. And it sort of deadened all of his momentum. All that buzz, all of that is he maybe died out. And I think that's fair to say, because you look at it now and he's not a name that comes up as a potential contender or future challenger in this division, even though he's 5-0 in the UFC and on a 9-fight winning streak overall, as I get a little ahead of myself here. Brendan Allen is a good test. He's 8-2 overall in the UFC. He is a good grappler himself. He's got some good striking, confident kid. This is one of those spots where if Muniz is going to be a guy, he's got to come out and really show it. This is the chance to sort of get a do-over from the Uriah Hall win, right? The Uriah Hall win is fine. It's a victory. It keeps you moving forward. You come out and make a statement here and get a first-round finish over Brendan Allen, then we get a little bit of buzz back. Then we have to start talking about Andre Muniz facing the Sean Stricklands and the Jack Hermansons of this division, and maybe down the line, Robert Whittaker or someone at the top end of the weight class. He was there once. He was somebody we were talking about in that vein. Part of that is because middleweight was a little thin and we weren't sure who was going to go, but we also thought he was going to just keep rolling. We thought he was going to get those opportunities. They didn't come last year. He had the one fight. It sort of fell flat. It sort of stifled his momentum, and we'll see if he can get it back on Saturday. Move to the heavyweight division. I laugh because here we are on a fight night card, and we are going to the heavyweight division for Augusto Sakai and Don'Tale Mayes. My question is just, why does the UFC love these kinds of fights so much? I know it's become a running joke, and I mentioned that on Twitter on Saturday with my guy Craig Allen from the East Coast of Canada, who said the same sort of thing as Josh Parisian and Jamal Pogues are out there, exhausted heavyweighting for 15 minutes. I don't get it. So I should maybe correct this. Why does the UFC love these kinds of fights in this position? So I get that you have to give Augusto Sakai more fights. You've got to get Don'Tale Mayes some fights. You want to find out if Don'Tale Mayes is somebody that can move forward at 31 years old, that's shown some pop, but also shown some limitations. You want to see if Augusto Sakai is just shot or if he's just faced better competition because he comes in on a 4-fight losing streak, but it's against people that are ranked ahead of him, so it's a little bit justifiable. But to me, this just doesn't have to be in the middle of the main card. this can be earlier in the night so that if we get rolling a little bit here to start the main card, we don't have this fight that for all intents and purposes is going to be a slog. It just is. Augusto Sakai hasn't been a guy that is putting people out. He's got 4 wins in the UFC. 2 of them are by split decision. 2 of them are finishes, fine, but they're against lesser competition. Dante Almeida can bang and likes to bang, but he's also a guy that carries a lot of muscle, that carries a lot of mass, and therefore gets tired pretty quickly. So if this one, same as all of these, isn't done inside of 3 minutes, we're getting into trudge territory. And nobody wants to see it at this point. Nobody is sitting around being like, man, I can't wait to see these slow heavyweights in the middle of the main card. It just sucks the life out of everything. It's like a movie that has 20 minutes too much to it, that it just drags on and ruins what would otherwise be a pretty good movie. Stick this earlier in the night. Put this on the main card, or put this, on the prelims. Find somebody else on this card that you need to showcase, that you want to cast a little bit of a light on, and stick them in that middle spot on the main card. Give them that opportunity, that if things are building and then we roll right into one of these other fights, and I'll point out a couple as we go throughout the rest of this card, that could certainly, some of the ones from the prelims that could certainly be in this position and would benefit more, because I don't think either of these guys really truly benefit all that much, because no one believes that they're going too much further ahead in this division than they are right now. I know we harp on it all the time. We will most certainly joke about it on Thursday on the preview show. I will joke about it throughout the week. We joke to dull the pain. Got to stop this, UFC. Got to stop this. Move to the flyweight division. Tatiana Suarez returns against Montana De La Rosa. And the question is, what is reasonable to expect from Suarez at this stage? So it's been over 3 years since we've seen Tatiana Suarez. The good side, the positives working for her. Undefeated, still only 31 years old, was on an Olympic wrestling track before dealing with thyroid cancer. So that grappling element is still there. She has got the grit. She has got the toughness, the grind, all of those things to deal, as we've seen both in the cage and outside of the cage, and dealing with all the adversity she's been forced to deal with. The question marks, the potential hurdles, is that it has been this lengthy layoff. It has been neck and shoulder injuries. It has also been a knee injury. So it's a bunch of different things that after that amount of time off, what have we got left in this prospect that looked at one point prior to these injuries like she was destined to be a UFC champion? The way she dominated Carla Esparza, I remember watching that fight and just thinking, you could put her in a title fight next and she's got a shot. And then she went out, she earned a good win, but not a great win against Nina Nunes, and it sort of muted things a little bit. She's been off since then. I think the move up is the right decision. I think Montana De La Rosa is the right opponent for this return, because we know what Montana De La Rosa brings to the table. We know who she is, what she's capable of, the level of fighter that she is. Not that she's capped, not that she doesn't have room to advance. She herself just turned 27 a couple weeks ago, so can still obviously build as she continues to age and gain experience and work with the team that she's working with a little bit more. But it's a good test for Suarez to come back to. She's not getting thrown all the way into the deep end of the talent pool. She's not even facing a ranked opponent, but it gives you a chance to see if, despite all the time off, if despite all the injuries, she's still that type of competitor with that dominant tool in her back pocket, that dominant skill set that allows her to go out and just manhandle fools. Because that's what she did on the way up for the most part. And if she picks right back up here at flyweight, which is already super interesting and got more interesting last weekend with Erin Blanchfield, then we're really going to start spending a lot of time talking about what the next couple of years of this division are going to look like, the next set of contenders for Valentina Shevchenko, the potential opponents, the potential legacy fights for Bullet as she gets ready to fight in a couple of weeks' time. Starting to get excited. Was already excited for flyweight. Starting to get even more excited. Next up, Mike Malott versus Johan Linace. My question is, why you got to match the two Canadians up against one another? I thought this for this fight when it was announced. I thought it for the Nathaniel Wood, Lerone Murphy fight when it was announced for London. Now, Nath has had to pull out because of an injury. But even then, I just don't understand in most instances when you're looking at athletes from outside of the US, why you pair them off against one another. Why not see if you can have two different Canadian welterweights making a little progress, making a little headway, especially when we know the plan is to come back to Canada at least once this year. You're going to need Canadian fighters on those cards. So why not try to build each of these guys up individually? Mike Malott is coming off a very good performance in his UFC debut against Mickey Gall last year. Knocked him out in the first round. Good win, good performance, good fighter overall. Still not 100% sure where he sort of caps out, where he fits in the division, but somebody you can build around a little bit in terms of athletes from this country. Linnaeus is coming off a decision win over Darian Weeks. He lost his debut against Gabriel Green, but he's got big power. We saw that on the Contender Series when he knocked out, I believe, Justin Burlinson. It just doesn't make sense to me when you know Canada is on the calendar for later this year. I get that they're both most likely going to be on that card, regardless of where it is and when it is, health provided. But you could have potentially two guys going forward at the same time, rather than one of them coming in off a loss, as is guaranteed here. It just doesn't make sense to me. It's just a weird piece of matchmaking. You've got enough fighters in the welterweight division that this doesn't have to be the matchup. And so, again, similar to the heavyweight thing, if I'm in charge, if I've got the book, I'm changing this around and I'm splitting these two guys off, having them each face someone separately and see if we can't get two Canadians with a victory or a 2-fight winning streak, as it would be in the UFC, going forward into a return to Canada later this year. Sticking with Canadian fighters, one of Malott's teammates at Niagara Top Team, Jazz Davicius against Gabriela Fernandez. My question is just, can Jazz Davicius bounce back? She looked good in her Contender Series win. She looked solid in her victory over Kay Hansen in her debut. And then last time out, she lost to Natalia Silva in a fight that I think at the time, I can only speak for myself. At the time, I thought it was a bad loss because I'm confident. I'm intrigued by Jazz Davicius. I think she's got some of the intangible things, some of the toughness, the gritty, the grimy things that you need. And she can piece together some of the other things with the wrestling and the physicality as we get going forward. Now that we've had some space from it and we've seen a little more of Natalia Silva, it's not that bad a loss. It's not a bad loss at all. In fact, it's a loss where you're like, okay, fine. You lost to her. She looks really good. She's on a track to be a top 15 fighter this year with a couple more wins. But it still means Jazz comes into this one off a loss. And she's facing a newcomer. She's facing a debuting fighter. And so it's 3 straight fights against young, inexperienced in the UFC athletes. And at a certain point, when you're in that group as well, the only way to get out of this cycle is to win fights, is to win your way out of it. And when you're coming in off a loss and they're giving you the incoming newcomer, and I just want to double check that Gabriela Fernandez is in fact making her UFC debut, or do I misremember that she's fought in the UFC already? Nope. Coming in off a LFA victory, championship victory. So making that debut, you're the one welcoming the quote unquote promising newcomer, or the potentially promising newcomer. This is you got to get back in the win column, especially again with the UFC targeting Canada at least once this year. You got to get moving forward. So if you're Jazz Davicius, you've got to have put in every minute needed. You've got to come out and look good. It's a tough fight. It's a good assignment. Let's see what you can do. Move to the lightweight division. Jordan Levitt versus Victor Martinez. My question is, what does Victor Martinez bring to the table? This is a guy that won his contract on the Contender Series in 2021. Didn't fight at all last year. And so we're sort of just in this limbo period, this unknown period of what he brings to the table. I can tell you that he looked good in his Contender Series win, and that at 13-4 overall, profiles as a solid fighter. He's another Fortis MMA guy, a Team Ferreira guy with Diego Ferreira down in Far Texas. Beat some good competition on the way up, but we just don't know. There's no way to sort of synthesize this at this point. 18 months out, finally making your debut. I would think, and I would theorize that having seen so many of his teammates go through the process that he's delayed going through now of Contender Series and then on to your UFC debut, there's a lot of people in that room that can help him prepare, make sure he's ready. Sayif Saud very much will have him there. But it's just a question of what's it look like, right? We know who Jordan Levitt is. Fought Paddy Pimblett, most famously, Contender Series grad, kind of middle of the pack guy in the lightweight division, maybe lower third pack guy in the lightweight division. But what does the Brick do in this one? What does Vic bring to the table? What does he show us on Saturday? That's what I'm looking for. That's what I want to find out. I know who Jordan Levitt is. I know what he looks like. I know his strengths and his weaknesses. Can Victor Martinez come out here and show me something in this matchup that makes me want to see him the next time out? Because it's been a minute, and for a guy like that, you've got to come out after an 18-month layoff and really have a standout performance, have one of those efforts that makes people go, oh, okay. Because Jordan Levitt's been seen, right? We've seen him. He's had that high-profile fight against Paddy. So if you're Victor Martinez, you can go out and beat this guy quicker than Paddy Pimblett did, with more ease than Paddy did. That's going to resonate a little bit. This is a good opportunity. It's a fight I think could have replaced that heavyweight fight on the main card, most certainly. But we'll see what happens. We stick around the lightweight division for Joe Selecki and Carl Deaton III. My question is, can Selecki become someone to track at lightweight? He's 4-1 in the UFC. One loss is by split decision to Jared Gordon. He's got a win over Jim Miller. He's got a win over Austin Hubbard, Matt Wyman. And I can't remember the most recent one, Alex De Silva, I believe. And so we know the baseline. We know the floor. We know where he sits. He's 28, 29 years old. He's a grappler by trade, a black belt by trade. Is he somebody, though, that can he get beyond where he is right now? Can he get above this middle of the pack? Can he get above the Jared Gordon level? Can he get beyond here? I've really liked Joe Selecki since his Contender Series run. He's a kid that has gone all in on his career with the support of his family. And I love that. I love seeing that. He trains with a good crew out in North Carolina. John Salter, Jimmo, all of those guys. Good kid, has shown some good things. Good win over Jim Miller. Good win over Austin. Like, he's fought a good slate. But it just hasn't been that moment yet. There hasn't been that one performance yet where you're like, okay, now we're going somewhere. Most of them have been, all right, got it done. Okay, good. Yeah, I see it. Sure. And the loss to Jared Gordon was had some good moments, and then Jared Gordon just sort of out-veteraned him, out-savvied him. This is one of those fights, a short notice opponent in Carl Deaton. I believe Joe Selecki was supposed to fight last week, and now he's been pushed forward to this one with a late opponent change. This is one of those ones where if you are going to be a guy, you make a statement. You come out and you shine and you run through this newcomer. And you get people talking and you say, I know it's been a minute since I've been out here and I haven't had the best performances the last couple, but I'm back, I'm healthy, I'm focused, whatever the case may be. You have a name in mind and you seize this opportunity. Otherwise, you're going to just stay being a guy that's in this middle of the pack, which, as always, you know me. Nothing wrong with that. No shade to those people. Good way to earn a living. Good work if you can get it. But I think Joe Selecki has, or my belief, my expectation has always been that Joe Selecki has the potential and the skills to maybe get ahead of that, maybe move further along than that. And I want to see if he can get there. Catchweight bout at 130 pounds between flyweights O'Day Osborne and Charles Johnson. Johnson stepping in, both guys taking it late, actually, short notice. And my question is, are we witnessing the ascension of Charles Johnson? So this is a guy that made his debut last summer in London against Muhammad Mokaev. Lost that fight, but was competitive, pushed Mo to go the distance. Former LFA champ, won that belt and defended that belt, beat good competition to get there. And subsequently has earned wins over Zhalgas Zhumagulov and Jimmy Flick last time out, where he looked really good against Jimmy Flick. That was the one to me where I was like, okay, this dude's settled in. Now, he's got crazy hair. I don't understand the shaved head except for the little patch at the back thing. He's got Olympic rings tattooed on his back without, as far as I understand, any Olympic experience or aspirations for that matter. So I would love to talk to him about it, but those things are neither here nor there. He might be settling into a little run here. And we've talked all year already in the end of last year about flyweight getting real interesting on both sides of things now. And Johnson's just another piece that can make this division really start to sing. He's got some length. He's got some experience. He's got some savvy. He's a little bit older than some of these 26, 27, 28-year-olds, the Brandon Royvals, the guys in that range, the Amir Albazis that are young and exciting. Charles Johnson's a little more savvy. He's got a little more old man at the Y, low post spin moves, hit you with all the pump fakes to him. And so I want to see if this is really him starting to put it together and settle into life in the UFC. And the first fight, look, he sent overseas, man. Sent to London to face the top prospect, one of the top prospects in the sport on his home turf, and gave him a hell of a fight, pushed Mokaev. This wasn't similar. It was dissimilar to Mokaev's fight with Malcolm Gordon, which was his most recent appearance, where he sort of played around a little bit. And he's acknowledged he did too much playing to the crowd. He didn't play to the crowd a lot in that fight. Charles Johnson just fought him hard, just made him work. And that says something about energy. So we're going to see here. Osborne is a good but not great fighter. He's got some pop, but he's also hittable, coming off a knockout loss. Hasn't really been able to string a bunch of good performances together. So we'll see if Charles Johnson can keep this run going, can keep this winning streak intact, and keep making some headway, in the flyweight division. We move back to lightweight. Rafael Alves against Nurulo Aliev. My question, as always with newcomers, or as often the case with newcomers, is what do we have in Nurulo Aliev? Looked great in the Contender Series. Now, I will say this, and please don't take this as me saying he is the next Khabib. But the dude looks like a young version of Khabib, physically, like visually, as I smash my mic. He looks like a young version of Khabib. He fights a little bit Khabib style, big wrestle, grappler, grind you down, and then beat the hell out of you guy. That's what he did on the Contender Series to earn his contract. It was actually, to me, a very smart, a very good performance. It was kind of Khabib-esque. He settled into position and then beat the hell out of his opponent towards the end of the round to get him out of there inside the first round. I love this fight. This to me is a little bit better of a version even than the Jamal Emmers Hussein Ashkabov fight from last week, because Rafael Alves is just a bundle of electricity and energy and movement and athleticism and explosiveness. And if you're a dude that is supposed to be good or going to be good, this is, I mean, he's a handful for anybody, right? Last time out, he fought Drew Dober, and it was a tough fight for Dober, who ends up getting the win in the third round, hits him in the sternum, right? Hits him with a body shot just right in the sternum, and Alves crashes. But he's a tough fight. Choked out Mark Jacasey in under a minute, 2 fights back. Like, he's a dangerous opponent. So if you're Aliev and you're coming in and you're 8-0 and you're 23, never tasted defeat, look like you might be a guy, let's see it. We're going to find out here. This is a better version of that Emmers Hussein Ashkabov fight, because I have a little more faith that Aliev is a good fighter and a good prospect than I did in Ashkabov. And Alves is a different kind of dangerous than Jamal Emmers was last week. This is a really intriguing fight to me. This is another one of those ones that if you wanted to put this on the main card, so was Ode Osborne and Charles Johnson, I may add. If you wanted to put this on the main card instead of Augusto Sakai and Don'Tale Mayes, no problem with it. Showcase these young fighters. Showcase this guy that might be coming up, that might be somebody. Not that he's going to be somebody real soon, not that he's going to be in the top 10 this year or next, but that he might be somebody that we need to pay attention to. Alves is a good first test. You go out and beat this dude, we're paying fucking attention going forward, or we should be. People should be. So we're going to see. I can't wait to see it. Next up, Haley Cowan versus Eileen Perez in the bantamweight division. My question is, can Haley Cowan validate her place on the roster? Now, before you say, Jesus, that's a real dickhead thing to say, allow me to explain. Haley Cowan is 7-2 overall. She's 31 years old. Earned a contract by winning a split decision on Dana White's Contender Series. It was an okay win. It wasn't a great win. Deservedly a split decision. If you wanted to tell me that Claudia Lette won that fight, I'm not going to argue with you all that much. I'd have to go back and watch it back really to have a good sense. She hasn't ever beaten anybody. And the last person that I can remember that got a contract from a split decision where it was like, is this really, I don't know, was Peter Barrett a few seasons back. Boston guy, Dana's guy, essentially. Won a decision that wasn't really a decision he should have won, got a contract, 2-0 or 3-0 in the UFC, and just back to the regional scene. Same type of thing too. Already in his 30s, been around a little bit. This was your shot. Some people just aren't meant to be here. With all due respect to Haley Cowan, who seems like a lovely woman, who is a training partner for a lot of females that are already in the UFC, and who all speak highly of her as a person and a training partner. I just don't like, it's okay for us to say sometimes that not everybody is UFC caliber, that not everybody is cut out to be on this stage. And I just want to see if Haley Cowan is. This is a fight where if she is, let me reset that. This is a fight that's going to tell us whether she is or not. Because Eileen Perez, for me, is not. Eileen Perez, you'll remember, is the Argentinian lady, fights at Samurai Fight House, and came out even before her debut. And, talking shit about Juliana Pena. Don't be talking about featherweights. Come on up here and I'll kick your ass. I'm going to beat this person. Then I'm going to beat Amanda Nunes in December. She made her debut against Stephanie Egger and she got tapped. She's that lady. She's the twerking at weigh-ins lady. So this is a fight where if you're Haley Cowan, come on and show it. Come on and prove it. Run through this woman. Because if this is a struggle, it raises all kinds of red flags about you being in the UFC and your ability to compete at this level. I wish you all the best. I hope you look tremendous and somebody comes to me on Saturday and is like, you were asking if she could validate her place in the roster. Here, she's done it. Hope that's how it plays out. But for me, as somebody that watches all of the Contender Series fights, that tracks all of their records, their results, things of that nature, other fighters that have graduated the way that Haley Cowan have struggled to have success going forward. And I'm just curious to see if she's somebody that is able to stick around in the UFC long-term or not. Next up, Garrett Armfield and Jose Johnson. My question is, can Johnson make the most of this opportunity? So Jose Johnson is a guy that has been around for a little bit, a couple Contender Series appearances, fought on a couple looking for a fight cards. Like, he's had these moments, right, where this opportunity was right in front of him a couple different times, and he stumbled and he couldn't get there, and he stumbled and he couldn't get there. He's 27 years old, been around for a minute, as I'm saying, and now he's in the UFC. And got here with a good win over Jack Cartwright, who is the Cage Warriors bantamweight champion. And so here you are, man. You're here. You finally got here. Deserved the contract with the win over Cartwright. It was a good win. It was a scrappy, scrambly, tough fight against a guy that had done well, previously undefeated. on one of the best regional shows in the business. Shouts to the folks at Cage Warriors. And so here you are. And you get a guy that made his debut on short notice, got defeated, is coming in with something to prove, same as you. Can you make the most of it? This is what you've been working for. Had a couple kicks at the can and couldn't get there, right? Lost in 2020 on the Contender Series to Ronnie Lawrence. Lost it looking for a fight against Manny Martinez. Both of those guys have gone on to have a little bit of success in the UFC. They fought each other at one point. It was a fun, entertaining fight. And so here you are. Can you make the most of this? Previously, you weren't ready. Understandable. Everybody gets to the point of readiness on their own time, at their own pace, all of those things. You're here. You've got a good matchup. You've got a winnable fight. What are you going to do with it? I'm looking forward to seeing. Last one before we get out of here, lightweight division, Eric Ghost Pepper Gonzalez versus Trevor Pique. My question is, what can you show me, Trevor Pique? What can you do that makes me want to see you going forward? So Trevor Pique is another one of these Contender Series grads that is 7-0, but hasn't really fought anybody. Knocked out Kama-Worthy in his last regional appearance before getting that Contender Series shot. Got a win over Malik Willis on Contender Series. I think that's the wrong name. Malik Willis is a football player. He is a quarterback for the Tennessee Titans, and that's why that's in my head as the Malik that he fought. It is Malik Lewis, I believe, now that I'm thinking of it. Yes, Malik Lewis, not Malik Willis. He did not beat the Tennessee Titans third-round draft pick from last year. So he beat Malik Lewis. He beat Kama-Worthy before that. That's one of those wins that it looks nice on paper, but Kama-Worthy is, with all due respect to the Death Star, shot as a fighter. Got bounced out of the UFC on KO losses, went to the regional scene, and caught a couple more KO losses. The end has come for Kama-Worthy, so I don't want to put a lot of stock in that win for Trevor Pique. And so here you are against a guy that has lost each of his first two UFC appearances. Granted, it's Jim Miller and it's Terrence McKinney, so two solid light heavyweights, lightweights, two good dudes that you weren't the favorite against. It went how it was essentially supposed to go or going to go. But here you are, man. This is why I track Contender Series. This is why I've been really trying to pay attention this year, especially to the class of 22, because I think over these last couple of years, more people that have graduated have been super early in their career and not quite ready and formed and capable of being here and really excelling early. And so with every one of them that comes, I just want to see it. Can you show me something that has me go, all right, I get it. I'm in. Great. Go develop, continue progressing, and I'm in. It's the same thing that applies to Nurulo Aliyev and anybody else on this show from Contender Series, both last season and previous seasons. Can you show me that this contract was merited? Can you show me that you got that deal and went, okay, now I've got to prove something? That's just step one. Now we got in the door. Now I got to stay here. This is a good fight for Trevor Pique. If he is somebody, if he's got something, come out and show it. Beat Eric Gonzalez, who has shown thus far, who has struggled thus far in the UFC. Come out and do it. Come out and show me. I know a lot of people will look at this card and will hear these questions and be like, I don't care. I don't want to ask these questions all the time. I don't look at these athletes the same way you do. And I get that. Fully understand that. That's not a knock on anybody else. I have always maintained and will always maintain I am an outlier. I am a one of one when it comes to the level of focus and care I have for all of these fights and all of these athletes. But I do think that the thing we miss sometimes is that these are the fights where we learn very early on, early days, early stages, who to really pay attention to. This is where we figure out if you have to start paying a little more attention. I'm going to pay attention no matter what, but this is where we start finding out, okay, there's a little something here. So if I'm looking at this card and I'm looking for a couple of names that really stand out as if they get a good performance, you should really be paying more attention. The top of the list is Nurulo Aliyev. for me. 23 years old, undefeated, 8-0, facing a good guy, a guy that we know what he brings to the table, who he's beaten, what it takes to beat him. Secondary from there, I look at probably Mike Malott just as a slightly older guy that if he can get another good win this weekend, then maybe he starts putting things together and gets a little bit of a speed up in terms of his ascent, in terms of his progression of opponents. And then it's Joe Solecki, just because the level of opponent this weekend isn't necessarily as high as I would like to see for a guy that's already 4-1 in the UFC. But that's why I'm watching. That's why I'm paying attention, because these early days are when we find out whether we should invest more, or whether they can just be somebody that gets to progress along. And eventually, if they get there, myself or someone else that covers all of this stuff and pays attention to all of this stuff will fire up the bat signal and be like, hey, just so you're aware, you now need to pay attention to this person that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 fights into the UFC. That's all. I know it's not the biggest card. We've got a monster card coming next weekend. UFC 285, the return of John Jones, the return of Valentina Shevchenko, a great fight card from top to bottom. This one is good at the top. There's some intrigue the rest of the way through. I'm excited for it. I hope you are a little bit more now. I will be back tomorrow with 10 things I like. Ian and I will be back on Friday with severe picks and plays. Yet again, trying to get back into the win column in terms of cashing some tickets and having a good day at the wickets. We will be back with the preview show, myself and Ian and Harry on Thursday. We've got all kinds of stuff coming out on the site, on this channel, in regards to Bellator Dublin. Check out everybody on Twitter. They are doing fantastic work covering that event and will throughout the week. So please check that out. Sign up for the Patreon, SevereMMA.com/pints. It is well worth your time. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, like, leave us a comment if you would like. Say hello, whatever it is. Know that we love you. Know that we appreciate you. We'll see you next week.